sorry. I started grad school and I did not excel at allotting my time correctly. Hi, welcome back to my channel. It's Kay. So it's been about 2.5 months now since I posted my last video. It was a review of Fourth Wing, and I am sorry. I started grad school and I did not excel at allotting my time correctly. I was reading the entire time, and here's the my semester reading wrap up is what we're gonna go with. So, September. Let's get into it. The first book I read for September is Mad Honey by Jodi Picoult. Mad Honey was a fantastic book. I went into this book knowing absolutely nothing about it, not a single thing. I thought that it was maybe about bees because Mad Honey, but I knew that it was about a woman. I thought it was maybe a romance, which I guess it kind of is. But this book is essentially about a woman who is a beekeeper, and her son is accused of murdering his girlfriend. And then the book essentially follows the son and the mother and the development of the son's relationship and that whole process, how the murder ended up happening, and what comes of him being accused of murdering her, the trial process, all of that. It was very interesting and enjoyable. I've never really considered things like how the family of someone accused of murder has to cope with that information, because A, do you believe that they're innocent, or do you think that they're guilty? And then B, do you stand by them when everyone else thinks that they're guilty if you don't? Or do you stand by them thinking that they're guilty? And what repercussions that has in society and like the people around you in your town, because everybody's following this murder trial. So that was a really interesting book. I will say the ending was unbelievable. It like brought me back to reality, and I was like, no, this could have been such a good book. But the ending just sort of fell flat for me a little bit. Because of that, I think I ended up giving this book a 4-star rating on Goodreads. So the second book that I read was Fourth Wing, and I think I gave this 5 stars. I did a whole separate Fourth Wing review way back. That's the last video I posted at the beginning of September. I'll put it up top so that you can go ahead and take a look at that if you'd like to. The third book that I read in September was Hooked by Emily something. And this book was okay. It was a dark romance that was a spin on Peter Pan. So it's basically Wendy falling in love with Hook, but taking place in the actual real life world, but with gangs, I think it was. And it was just interesting. It was a 3-star read. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. The fifth book that I read in September was, okay, I'm kind of a sellout here because I've sworn up, down, left, right that I would never read this book ever. And I did. I read A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. I read it in preparations for Crescent City 3 because I love the Crescent City books, and I know that the new book is taking place with converging universes to keep things from being spoilery. That's all I'm going to say on that. I figured that I had to know what was going on in all of the universes in order to understand what is going on in Crescent City 3. So I bit the bullet and I listened to the audiobook version of this, and it was an okay book. I gave it 3 stars. I couldn't give it more than that. I really liked the story itself. I thought that it was interesting. I love getting to learn more about Feyre and Rhysand, and Rhys just like owns my heart at this point. And I would have rated it higher than 3 stars if it was about just about anyone else. I really just cannot stand Nesta. I think the best character in this book was Rhys, which is a hot take because everyone seems to think he was like a terrible, out of character, garbage person in this book. I think that largely comes from his treatment of Nesta in her traumatized state. And I think that he's the only person that's kind of realistic in this book because everybody else seems to just excuse Nesta and her past and everything she's ever done. And that's just not. Maybe I hold grudges too harshly, but it just didn't seem realistic to me that everyone was just like, whatever, Nesta did things, it's cool, whatever. And Reese was the only person that really stuck to his guns and was like, no, she's done nothing to show that she's a good person. So I'm not going to treat her like a good person. And I respected that a lot. Honestly, probably why I gave this book 3 stars. So the sixth book that I read in September was The Bodyguard by Catherine Cento, and this book was fantastic. I love Catherine Cento. I've only ever read 2 books by her now, but those 2 books have both been absolutely amazing books. I think the first one I gave 4 stars. This book, I'm almost positive I gave it 5 stars. It is just such a funny, entertaining story. It's a page turner. It is about a woman who is a bodyguard and she has to protect a celebrity from a crazy stalker fan that they don't think is a real concern. And mind you, she has to do this in order to be promoted. The only thing is she's competing for this promotion with her ex-boyfriend who dumped her on like the first page of the book the day of her mother's funeral. So it's just it dumps you right into the story, and it is so intriguing and entertaining and fascinating to see like the roles reversed. I'm really bad at reading the backs of books. I just don't do it. If I've heard something about it from someone else and it sounded interesting, I'll read it. If not, I'm one of those terrible people that picks up a book based solely off of the cover and or title of the book. So I was like, oh, The Bodyguard is going to be about like some bodyguard who's protecting some woman from XYZ, whatever. So color me surprised when she is the bodyguard. And I don't know her name. So we're just going to move right along. Because there's so many books I have to go through, we're going to do very brief descriptions and probably not give any names. Okay, cool. So the 7th book that I read was Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. So Every Summer After is about somebody, a woman who she finds out that her childhood boyfriend's mom, maybe dad, one of them, passes away. And so she goes to the funeral. I'm not quite sure why, but she's invited by her ex-boyfriend's older brother to come to the funeral. And so she does, even though she hasn't spoken to her ex-boyfriend in, I don't know, 10, 15 years, something ridiculous. And then in this time, you're also being told about their relationship, how they met as kids, how they got into a relationship, and they allude to this big breakup thing, and then that you learn about that at the end of the book, and things progress. It's a romance, so we all know that it's just a second chance romance. Given the way that it's told. So obviously they end up together. And once again, I'm sleeping on second chance romances. This is only the second one I've read, and it's the second one I've liked. So maybe I need to read more of these. If you've got any recommendations, drop them in the comments. I will give them a read, I promise. The next book that I read in September, not sure what number I'm on at this point, so we're dropping the numbers, is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klung. This book was so good. It made me cry. It made me smile. It made me laugh out loud. It was so exciting. I think it's about a caseworker named Linus. Maybe that's his name. Don't hold me to that. And he goes to a magical orphanage for the like most powerful, dangerous magical children. And he is basically trying to decide if the orphanage that he's reviewing is good or if it should be closed down. And these children have been through so much, and the caretaker that they have has also been through a lot, and they are just living their lives being happy, healthy, wholesome children who are trying to make the most out of the cards that they've been dealt. And you hear some sad things. Like there's this poem that one of the kids writes And I don't know the poem and I don't have the book with me, but it's about being paper and basically how impressionable people are and how like the history that they have is like permanently etched into them. Sort of like paper, how no matter what you do to it, once it's been altered either by being written on or crumpled up, you can't ever get it back to its original like state. And it just, I bawled my eyes out when I read that. Oh my God, I'm getting teary. I'm not gonna cry. But it is such a good book, and it really makes you think about human existence and the way that we treat people and the way that people are categorized and shunned by society for things. It's just, oh, it's such a good book. In case that doesn't make it clear, this book's a 5-star read, and please pick it up. If you get nothing else out of this, pick up that book. The next book that I read is The Gift of Imperfection by Brené Brown. I give this book 5 stars on Goodreads. I think I need to adjust my reading because I don't remember a single thing about this book. It's about imperfection. In people, I know that because it's like a self-help book. And it's about embracing your imperfections. But outside of that, could not tell you anything about it. I clearly didn't get anything from it. And so, yeah, maybe don't pick that one up or do. It's really up to you. And then the last book that I read in September was Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. I definitely didn't say that right, but whatever. I can't even tell you why I picked this up. I think it was a skip the line read on Libby, and I was like, this looks pretty cool. Looks like a long fantasy book that'll take some time to get through. And so I borrowed it, and that's all that I knew going into it. It's about a woman named Claire who is married to a guy named Henry, I think, and she travels back in time to 18th century Scotland during like, is it rebellions? I'm not quite sure. I'm not a history person, so I don't know what's supposed to be going on. But there's like clan fighting going on, and she warns somebody about the troubles. So maybe it's Ireland then. Wait, because, right? The troubles were in Ireland, not Scotland, right? Or were they in Scotland? I don't know. History is above me. But so she time travels by mistake to 18th century Scotland, and she's stuck there alone, having to make the most of it. And she meets this guy named Jamie, and he, for like safety reasons, they get married, but it's their like love story and how their life, how they grow attached to each other and have to navigate Scotland with her being from the future and like knowing things that she probably shouldn't know and all of that. It's a TV show, which I didn't know. The book was really good. Really good is a strong word. It was probably like a 3.5 star read. It was a little unbelievable how adaptable Claire was. There was no, oh my God, I'm in the past, I have no idea what to do, what's going on. She just immediately was like, right, all right, I'm in the past, let's go. Which is not realistic. But 3.5 would be a good guess. If I had to pick a whole number, it'd be 3 stars. It was fine. I started the second book, didn't finish it, and so yeah, that was September. Okay, so continuing right along, for October, I had a significant decrease in reads, and the semester was picking up, and I couldn't read as much. So the first book I read was Beach Read by Emily Henry. And this book was really good. I gave it 5 stars, which is funny because I'm pretty sure all of the reviews that I've seen on this book were not good and that they didn't like it. But I absolutely loved the relationship. It's about a romance writer, January, and a fiction writer, Augustus. And they basically are both in reading slumps, and they end up spending the summer in the same place. And while they find out that they are neighbors, and one thing leads to another, and they end up agreeing to switch genres for the summer and write in the other person's genre to prove that they can, I guess, and sort of to help them get out of their reading slump. And the way that the romance built in this book was that they would go on outings based on the other person's genre to like give perspective into things that should be written about. inside of that genre. And basically these little outings become dates, and one thing leads to another, and their relationship is just so cute and wholesome, and like it becomes very apparent as you go through it that they genuinely care about each other. Yeah, it was a good time. It was a good book. I liked it. The second book that I read in October was Atomic Habits by James Clear. Finally, okay? It took me ages. I owned this book for years and years and years, and I finally read it. This book is good if you're looking to make changes in your life and you're not quite sure how to, or you've tried making changes and you weren't able to succeed. It just talks about making micro changes in your life, because if you make a 1% improvement and a 1% improvement and a 1% improvement, over time you're going to make those drastic changes and you won't even notice that it happened, and you'll be more successful because of how small of a step you were taking the entire time. And that's the gist of the book. Read it for more in-depth explanation, but it's good and it seemed like useful information. The next book that I read, book number 3 of October, was The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. This book. I have a reading vlog coming up about this book. It's going to be my next video. So I'm just going to say this book was so good. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. And it's a fantastic read if you want a page-turning romance, something that gets you going. I was dying the entire time, and I was rooting for this couple to get together, and obviously they do. It's a romance, so, you know. Yeah. It's Connor and I think Felicity is her name. Those are the 2 people in the relationship. And basically the premise of the book is that Felicity is a romance author and Connor is a producer. And he is basically forced to produce a reality TV show, and he comes up with the idea of having Felicity be on the reality TV show. It's going to be a dating show, and all of the contestants on the dating show are going to be based off of the male like stereotypes in romance, and her finding her like hero of her life. And it was so good, and the tropes were hilarious, and the guys that were used were entertaining, and I liked the way that Connor was also used in the story, because he wasn't a part of the dating show, but you wanted the show to succeed because you wanted him to succeed, but you wanted her to be with him because you wanted Felicity to be happy. It's just such a good book, and oh my god, it's so good. And then the last book that I read in October was The Ruin of Kings by Jen Lyons, and this book was really good. It is one of those like long fantasy books that is not a romance. Never read an adult fantasy book before. I guess that's not true. I've read The Name of the Wind. But this is only the second adult fantasy book I've read that's like one of those long epics that has multiple stories and just continues to go on for ages and ages. And so this book was a long book, and it is about a boy named Kieran who is forced into slavery, and him having to be a slave and then getting free, and how he progresses to like save the world potentially. And it's a really good book, and I'm going to be doing a video on this series, another series video, but I'm on the last book right now, so I need to get that finished up before I can. On the last book right now? I actually just finished the last book today, so I need to like put all of my thoughts into a concise video and script and then do that. So I'm not going to describe much about it outside of that. If you want to see that, it's coming. So that was October. And last but not least, we have November. So for November, I ramped it up a little bit, read a few more books, not too many more. I definitely didn't hit September levels of reading. Anyways, November started out with Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, maybe? And this is a memoir about grief and a woman's relationship with her mother, and it is so good. This book was heartbreaking. I absolutely loved getting to read about how Michelle grew up, how her mother and her interacted, how their relationship developed over time, her mother's battle with cancer, and just how she did her whole life and how her mother tied into her life and how her mother's death ties into her life now. It's a fantastic read, and I don't feel comfortable giving star ratings to a book like this. It was really good and it made me cry and I enjoyed it. So if that's something that you might be interested in, check this book out because I mean I would recommend it to people. The second book that I read was The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons. This is the second book in the 5-book series. I don't know what that series is called. And the second book is not as good as the first book, which I will get into in that video that I'm releasing soon. But if you stick it through the second book, it does, like the first book is really good. The second book kind of falls off. But then the books after that, also fantastic. And so you just kind of have to like trudge through the second one in order to enjoy the rest of the series. Funnily enough, my third and fourth book of the month were actually The Memory of Souls and The House of Always, which are the third and fourth book in that series, and they are absolutely fantastic. The fourth one, it ended, and I was immediately like, I need the fifth book because that's the final book in the series. It makes you want to be able to read at like Spencer Reid speed from Criminal Minds. I'm not going to say more about this. Sorry, I'm not going to say any more about those just because, again, that video is coming out and I don't want to spoil something in this. That video will be spoiler filled, and there's no way for me to describe the fourth book in a series without spoiling what happened in the first 3 books. So I'm not going to get into those. The fifth book that I read was Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowens, and this book is so good. It's the first book in a young adult series about a black mermaid. Say no more. I was sold. I was like, a black mermaid? I've never, like, outside of the new Little Mermaid movie, like, I haven't seen it. I wanted to read it. And so I did. And it is fantastic. It has to do with, basically, the black mermaid, her job is to collect the souls of slaves that die during the journey to where they're going to be like sold, essentially. So anyone that's like thrown overboard and has died, or she has to take their soul from their body and then help them like move on. It's such a good book, and there is a sequel, and I have not read that yet, but I will eventually. I've read the 6th book that I read this month was Tiny Beautiful Things, Advice from Dear Sugar by Cheryl Strayed, or Sugar. And basically this is it's kind of like a book that's like comments on life overall, because it's a collection of responses from the Dear Sugar advice column. I think that's what those were called, from, I don't know, some newspaper or something like that happened at some point in time. It's a collection of the ones that felt most impactful, and then she added a few other letters that she's gotten since that and answered those, and it was really interesting, and it offered me a lot of insight into things that are actually going on in my life right now that I didn't necessarily want insight on, but I was given it when I read this book, and I did appreciate it, and it made me see things differently. And so that was a very nice consequence of the books that I was reading. And then the last book that I read this month that I actually finished today, November 30th, and that is The Discord of Gods by Jen Lyons. That is the last book in the Ruin of Kings series, and it was a beautiful wrapping up. I was pleasantly surprised by the ending of this book, and I really I loved the character development in this series, and I loved the way that the characters were handled. I loved the way that everything was tied up. And if you want more information on that, feel free to check out my future video. If you have any other really long series to recommend, please drop it down in the comments below. I had so much fun reading that series, and I'd love to read another one. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I promise not to keep you guys waiting this long again, okay? Y'all have a nice day. Bye. Okay, actually, one more thing. To Heather Reed, who subscribed to me over the course of the last 2.5 months, thank you. Because I have not posted in 2.5 months, and you still subscribed to my channel, which was very nice and kind, and I appreciated it. Be sure to give me a thumbs up, a like, drop a comment down below if you enjoyed this video, what else you want to see from me, if you think I should give TBRs another go. I really don't think that's a good idea, but I mean, maybe it's fun to see that I managed to fail to read a single book on my TBR every single month. Yeah, and then subscribe. But thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.